Hi good people, my name's Titus, and today we're going to be doing another tutorial on PCG, or Procedural Content Generation. This time we're going to use splines to influence our PCG volumes to spawn our static meshes. Let's not waste any time and just jump right into it. Okay, so I have the third person starter template here. The first thing we need to do is we need to enable PCG from the plugins menu. So just select plugins, and then we can search for Procedural Content Generation, and then just check the box for the framework one. This will require you to restart your editor, as just an FYI or heads up for that. Once you have the PCG plugin enabled, we need to create a new map with a landscape component in it. So we'll go to File, New Level, and I'm going to choose an open world, but you can create a blank map. So we'll hit Create. And then we have the landscape component. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select landscape, and I'm going to add a material. And I'm just going to give it some grass texture here. There we go. All right, so to make this work, we first need to create our PCG graph. So I'll come to my content drawer, right click, I'll select PCG, choose PCG graph, and then we have to give it a name. We'll do PCG tutorial. You can call it whatever you want. Once we have it, we can drag it in the scene, and then you'll notice we have this little cube set up here. Basically anything inside the cube will be influenced by the PCG settings. You can of course scale this cube to be whatever size you want to encompass the entirety of your landscape or just a particular area, kind of whatever you're looking for. Once we have that created, the next thing we need is of course a spline. So we're going to use a blueprint to create our spline. So we'll right click, choose blueprint class, we'll use type actor, and I'll just call this BP underscore spline pathways. Then we'll double click, and then we simply have to add a spline component, and we choose the one under utility. And that's pretty much it, because we're going to override this spline component and kind of take over this blueprint when we set up the PCG elements. So we can just compile, save, and we can actually close out this because we won't be going back into it. All right, so now we need to actually go into the PCG graph. So we'll double click that, and I'm going to dock this in the main window. What we'll do is we will basically start off by spawning a forest, and then we'll basically carve out a path inside that forest. So to be able to do that, the first thing we need is we need to get our landscape data. So search for get landscape data, then we can pull off that into a surface sampler node, and then if we press the D key for debug, it'll add in a visual debug cubes, so you can kind of see what the PCG component is doing, which is perfect. We'll press D to get rid of that for now, but we're going to pull off into a transform points node here. We'll adjust these settings in a bit, but we'll leave it alone for now. And then we're just going to pull into a static mesh spawner node. This is what actually creates your static mesh. In the details inspector on the right, there is a array element for mesh entries. We can just hit the little plus sign, it'll add an element. You can add multiple elements, have multiple varieties of trees, and it'll spawn different ones based on a seed factor that you can adjust as well. For this tutorial, I'm just going to add in one element. Just kind of make it simple. And I'm going to choose a spruce tree. There we go. Now if we go back into the scene, we can see we have a very basic forest of very uniform standard trees here. Right now it doesn't look too good, so let's make some adjustments and see if we can make it a little bit more interesting. If we select the surface sampler, it's currently set to 0.1 points per square meter. I can bump this up to maybe 0.2, and we have some more trees. Another thing you can do is you can lower the point extents. If I press the D key, you can see the size of the cubes. If I use a lower number, that'll give more space so more cubes can spawn. So you'll notice we get more trees. So that's another way to do it as well. Let's go ahead and press D to get rid of the debug. And we can see our forest coming together. Still looks a tad uniform, so let's see if we can fix that. That's what the transform points node is for. We can add in maybe an offset. We'll do -50, to 0 on the Z to dig some of the trees into the ground. Then we could add some rotation to the trees. We'll be between 0 and 359 degrees. And then maybe we can scale it between 1 and 2. Now if we look at our forest, it looks a little bit more interesting and more organic. So it looks a lot better. So now what we need to do is let's add in our spline. So we'll grab our blueprint, just drag it into the scene here. And it's hard to see, but the component, I'll maybe drag it up here. It has a little square here. If I click on that, I can actually edit the spline, so I can drag it out so it's further. I can also push it so it curves a bit, and it has these little handles, so I can select the handles and drag those around as well. If I select the main point, I can hold the Alt key and I can spawn more points along the curve, so I can create this unique or interesting path here. And then basically what I want to do is I just want to create a little bit of a winding path. And then maybe we get something like this. If you need to adjust the pivot point, Control tilde will do that, and then we can pull along the actual spline pathway. I think that looks pretty good, so I will deselect, and then I will reselect the spline so I get the little gizmo, and then I will just grab it and drag it over. So we kind of have it in position like so. And I think that looks perfect. So let's go back to our PCG graph and let's begin to actually sample that data, and we'll use a difference node to actually kind of subtract out the scene. So what we can do is right click and do get spline data. And then currently it's referencing self. We don't have a self-contained spline, so we have to actually set that to all world actors. And then you can do it by tag, but in this case we made a blueprint, so I'm going to do a blueprint class, and then I can just search for the blueprint that I gave, that I named it, which was spline pathways. All right, once we have that, we can pull into a spline sampler node. And then if I debug that and go back to the scene, kind of come in, you can probably see it, but you see like a little thin line. Let's see if we can maybe make that a little bit more visible. We'll pull this into a extents modifier node, and I will remove the debug over here. Now, actually, I'm going to select the spline sampler and press A. And then in the bottom area, I can expand out the PCG tutorial to see that spline data. And what I want to bring attention to is the bounds. You'll notice the X value is different, while the Y and the Z value is a value of -1. So it's like an even scale. So your spline, if you're following along with me, will likely stretch along the X-axis because Unreal uses the X as the forward axis. But if you created the blueprint and you maybe rotated it, it could be going along the Y or the Z. You just need to figure out whatever axis is currently set to a scale of either 1 or -1, and that's the values you need to modify on this next step here. So in my case, it's going to be the Y and the Z, and if you're following along, it should be as well, but if you rotated it for whatever reason, you might actually have to do the X. So I'm going to select the extents modifier, and then I have the extents value here, so that's the X. This is the Y and the Z, so if I bump this to like 250, 250, you can see how that kind of looks, and you see it creates these little planes, which is perfect. I just need them to be a little bit longer, so we can come in, and for the mode, instead of set, I can maybe add it to a multiply, and then it kind of creates this sort of effect, which is perfect, because I kind of want it to carve along that path. And depending on the size that you make it will be how big your path is. So you may want to increase or decrease these values depending on how you see fit. So I'll get rid of the debug node there. We will pull into a transform points in case we want to add in any offsets or scale differences. We'll leave it alone for now. But the next thing we want to do is we want to add in a reroute node, but one that we can actually rename. So it's called add named reroute declaration node. You'll select that, and then you can right click, select rename, and call it whatever you want. I'm going to call mine spline pathways. And then you can right click it anywhere and search for that name that you gave it, so you can easily use it in your charts. So as an example, for this one, we can pull into a difference node. I can plug this into the difference value, and then the output I can plug into the static mesh. I can get rid of the connection there. And we'll just even this out with Q. There we go. So now, if I did that right, we should see a path open up. It's perfect. And then I can grab this, move it along. Let's bring it to 0 on the Z. And then you can quickly kind of move your path, create custom paths very quickly and easily. So this is a pretty cool trick with PCG. Now the next thing you can do, if you want to take it a step further, let's maybe pull this back here. Let's select all these nodes. We will press Control D, duplicate them. And for the static mesh, instead of the tree, maybe let's spawn some grass. Want to get some tall grass, so maybe this one. And then if we go back, there should be some grass elements underneath the trees. You can see it's kind of sparse, so let's make some adjustments. On our surface sampler, we can bump up the points per square meter. Maybe we do 5. It's a little better. It's probably big too, so for the point extends, let's maybe do 10. For all the axis, and there we go. We got a lot more grass. So then I want to spawn a little bit of grass along the pathway, or maybe do flowers, or kind of whatever. So we can come down to our spline pathways, and we can just do a static mesh spawner. We'll add in an element, drill down, and we're going to search grass, but we'll do some actual light grass. So maybe this one. And that is working. You see that one little patch of grass? It's not too great though. So let's see if we can maybe bump up those numbers. So let's go back to the PCG system. We go back to the spline sampler, and you notice the mode is subdivision. You can increase the subdivisions and do it that way. Another way you can just do it is you can set it to like distance. And then you notice you have a lot more grass that way. And then I think if you increase the number, like say we go to 50, you'll get, basically more grass that way. And then we can also mess with the offsets here. So for the offset, I can do maybe negative 150, negative 150, to a positive 150. And then a scale of 1 to 2. And that'll give a little bit of variety. And then you sort of get that effect there. And kind of with that set, let's select our spline again. Can move it around. You can modify individual points. And you can create all sorts of interesting pathways just like that. But all right, everyone, I think we'll cut the video here, but I hope you found some informative value that you can take into your own projects. But as always, thanks for watching, consider subscribing, and we'll see you on the next one.